Hello, my name is Dr. Carmenza Mijan. I am the Senior Advisor for AARP. And thank you to the San Diego Oasis for the invitation to present to you at the Vital Aging Conference. I'm going to talk about how to build resilience from stress, some of the COVID-19 life lessons that we had. And there were so many life lessons and so many things that we learned being in this COVID environment. So we'll be talking about what is the meaning of resilience, tips on how to build resilience, volunteerism as a way to increase resilience and prevent isolation, and tips on volunteering in a multicultural society and the diverse communities that we live in. So overcoming our worries. I wonder how many of us felt like the woman in this picture. We were worried. We may have been filled with anxiety. We may have been sad, feeling depression. And we were wondering if perhaps will the sun ever come out again? And we were just surrounded by news and bad news of the coronavirus and the pandemic. And we had concerns and we had some legitimate reasons to be worried. However, when we talk about resilience, what exactly is resilience? And resilience is not simply coping with a bad situation, but it's turning difficult times into a growth experience. And that's a definition from Froma Walsh, author of Strengthening Family Resilience. So we know that situations like the coronavirus pandemic triggered for us, many of us, the classic signs of anxiety: elevated heart rate and shortness of breath, anxiety attacks perhaps, depression, sadness. But studies show that when we see a situation like this as a challenge, something that we are able to rise to and overcome, we rise to the challenge, the heart becomes more efficient, blood vessels expand, you're more productive, and you might actually experience a better mental health outlook. However, when we see things as a threat, our blood vessels may contract, the heart works less efficiently, and decision-making is impaired. In the long term, viewing difficult episodes as unmanageable threats is also associated with accelerated brain aging. So how do we build resilience? What are some tips on building resilience? I'm going to give you some tips and provide some examples. So let's continue. So I'm going to suggest, as mentioned, some ideas for turning threats into challenges and challenges into teachable moments. And there are two ways that we can possibly take control. A way that we can face challenges, and there are two ways as mentioned, and they are both important. There's something called problem focus, and that involves giving ourselves credit, for example, for things that we have been doing right all along during this crisis. Perhaps we were following the CDC guidelines like social distancing and isolation. If you have or were doing this, stop for a moment and recognize the work that you've been doing. That's called taking control, and that's great. Emotion focus involves taking measurable action to reduce stress, which helps boost our immune system, and such tips such as perhaps meditation, self-care, affirmation, the things that we can do to improve our mental health outlook. I invite you also for some free 20-minute guided meditations that are available at the stayingsharp.aarp.org website for tips and meditations that can help guide you and make you feel less worried. Now, many of us during the pandemic were under intense marital stress, or perhaps family stress, Maybe we had our adult children return back home. Maybe we had school-age children and now they were at home doing remote learning. And so in times of stress, it helps to see the differences between us. And if it's your spouse or your partner or another child, between the two of you as a strength and not a weakness. Embrace the differences. Practice what is called diactic coping. That is the way that couples deal with everyday stress as well as critical life events. And it also applies to families, not necessarily couples only. Diactic coping can involve sharing goals and emotions, actively listening to your partner's worries, your family members' worries, and being supportive, both physically and verbally. Even if it's just one partner or one family member that takes these actions, it will benefit all parties. It will benefit both of you. And remember that if arguments escalate, consider professional counseling. Many health professionals are seeing patients virtually, and we're seeing patients during the crisis. And telehealth visits is something that probably will continue well into the future. So if you were a caregiver, for example, and was separated from your loved one, as a way to take control, don't underestimate the power of a simple phone call. While we know that this does not take the place of being physically present, the sound of your voice may provide your loved one great comfort. And vice versa, you listening to their voice may provide great comfort to you as well. During the pandemic, some facilities arrange for residents to talk to their loved ones on the phone, maybe while standing near a window where you could see them. And some were able to send you photos. Not ideal. However, what we do know is that small things like that can help you to see that they are okay, and they get to see that you are okay. Now, if you are a caregiver struggling, you can understand that if you were used to or are used to relying on a network of friends, relatives, and professionals to help you care for your vulnerable loved ones, you may feel, or maybe you felt, as if you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. In-home physical therapy appointments, bathing assistance, even just a reprieve, a little respite so that you could go out for a walk or do some shopping. Suddenly that help is gone, was gone, and it was on you 24/7. A very difficult situation. And in situations like that, it's easy to fall into worst case scenario thinking. So I know it's not easy, but I would say to you, don't do it. Don't fall into worst case scenario thinking. It's ineffective. If you feel yourself sinking into negativity, try something that might sound funny, but it's called controlled worry. And controlled worry, for example, is something that where you can schedule a 30-minute period to sit alone, ruminate, or write down your fears and worries. So you're controlling how much time you're going to spend in this worry phase. This simple practice, as funny as it might sound, has the power to help you contain your worries and free you to take action. So now think challenge. And it doesn't have to be all of your challenges, maybe just one challenge to start with. Each day, review your schedule and all the tasks that you need to accomplish. At the end of the day, congratulate yourself for meeting the challenge and then prep for tomorrow. And that can help you to take control of a bad situation. You can find guides for caregivers and the latest updates on safety recommendations at aarp.org/caregiving. This one was specifically difficult for all of us. We may have had peers, friends, or family members that were dying and died from the coronavirus. And whether it's a friend, a family member, or even a public figure who mattered to you, these losses are and were particularly painful and scary, because it's natural for us to see ourselves in this group and be worried. Am I going to get sick? Is my loved one going to get sick? Will they die? Will I die? I mean, these were very, very real fears. But what also made this situation specifically difficult is that many funerals were canceled or delayed indefinitely. And that robbed us of the time we needed to mourn in order to gain closure and move on. Some funerals and services, however, were online and gave people the ability to watch the service on your computer. And I had that situation. I had a 58-year-old cousin who died of COVID in Colombia, and they held their mass, their church service online via Zoom. And it was very comforting. It was very comforting to see the family gathered. It was very comforting to see everybody on the screen, not the best, not the ideal, but it was comforting nonetheless. Even if there's no formal ceremony, it's important to reach out to loved ones so that you can share your fond memories of your loved one who has passed, perhaps telling jokes. Think of something that you would have done with them at an actual funeral. What are your family's traditions when it comes to something like that? So even talking to somebody on the phone to do that is very helpful. These things all allow us to process what happened, honor the life of our loved one, and be able to move on. Let's talk a little bit about isolation. We know that the COVID crisis created tremendous isolation for many of us. We were shut in place, everything was closed, there were no activities. It was, for many of us, it was a scary time. And we know that isolation can have negative psychological effects. There's studies that have been done that show that isolation kills. And it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's an astounding statistic. We also know that connection is critical for everyone, and particularly for older adults. And we also know that in addition of taking care of our physical health, which we talked about a little bit before, you'll want to consider your emotional health as well and how to take care of it. So one of the best ways to overcome isolation is to become a caregiver. But in this case, it's a caregiver of yourself as best as you can. Practice self-care. We often talk about self-care techniques, and that could be going out for walks, yoga, meditation, massages, anything that you feel that you need to do to take care of yourself so that then you can take care of your loved ones. Turn your attention to others. Check in regularly with friends, family, through phone conversations, video chats, cards, or letters. Also, refocus your energies into concern for others. And that can help you to turn away from anxiety and towards connection or reconnection, especially now when we're starting to get out a little bit more. We can now reconnect with our friends, our family, our community. If you have or had caregivers who no longer could visit you, for instance, the group who brought meals to your door and they may not be able to do so anymore, or that person has changed, you can always reach out to them to stay in close touch. Again, a text, a phone call, a letter, a video chat. Community faith leaders can also be a powerful resource for inspiration and suggestions on how to be of service to others. So Let's summarize. Planning for the future, we know that planning for the future makes us more optimistic and resilient. So if you feel panicked, plan something for the future, which increases optimism. And I think now we're a little bit freer to plan for the future now that we are been vaccinated, getting out a little more, seeing people face to face. So maybe it's a little bit easier now for you to plan for the future. If you get stuck or sucked into a daily spiral of bad news, then seek out and share the good that happened to you in your day. Talk to your neighbor. Tell them the good things that happened, because we know that positivity is contagious. If you frantically hoarded food and disinfectant wipes, then flip your thinking to an altruistic mindset, focusing on doing something for someone else. Very early on during the pandemic, we heard about the Costco and the run on the toilet paper at Costco. And a little bit before that, I had been to Costco and I had purchased toilet paper. I had plenty of toilet paper. And rather than to think that I should just run again and get some more, I thought to myself, I have enough. I'll leave it there for someone who really needs it. And that made me feel a little bit more at peace and not as stressed. If you have started snapping at loved ones, then stop yourself. When you reach a level of 6 out of 10 on your own personal stress scale, disengage and take a breather. Close your eyes, meditate, step away for a little while, go for a walk, maybe do some yoga. Anything that'll help you to de-stress, and anything that maybe will create a temporary distance between you and your loved ones. If you felt uncomfortable slowing down, and I know that for me, this one was a particular challenge. We're all so used to running around, being double booked, and then had to stop all of a sudden. But one of the things that I say was a good thing that came out of COVID was that it gave us an opportunity to step back and consider what might come out of this might be a new appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. And I've tried to keep that for myself. I've tried to visit, now that we can, maybe just 1 or 2 friends, 1 or 2 family members, and not need to feel like I need to run from place to place, from house to house, all in one day to go see everybody, but to slow down and spend quality time with people and my loved ones. So just to summarize again, limit your news consumption, practice calming techniques, move your body, go for a walk, exercise, connect with loved ones, listen to music, dance in the kitchen, find activities that bring you joy, find something to do. Importantly as well, find ways to laugh and volunteer. We know that volunteering, you can return to your volunteer activities and it will make you feel good, prevent isolation, reconnect you with friends and family. And perhaps if you're not a current volunteer, you can seek new volunteer opportunities. So moving forward, how do we move forward in this post-pandemic and back to our volunteer activities in a multicultural society and in the diverse communities that we live in? So I'm just going to talk about some definitions and some things that we have been hearing, some terms. And we've been hearing a lot about this term called unconscious bias or implicit bias. So what does it mean? A bias are judgments and behaviors that we have towards others, and an unconscious bias, I should say, that we're not aware that we're doing it. So for example, a bias can be a stereotype that we might have about a certain group of people. but we're not aware that we have them. And we're not aware that our thinking is a bias. It's an unconscious behavior. So it's outside of our own conscious awareness. It's important to understand that we all have unconscious bias. These biases stem from our brain's tendency to want to find order, make split decisions, such as, is this a fight or flight situation? Am I safe or unsafe? So it's a decision, and it's a split decision made by our brains to help us to organize our social world by categorizing it, and categorizing it quickly. We need this as a defense mechanism. It becomes a bias when it is an irrational fear and we act irrationally. And if we don't know that we're doing that on a conscious level, then it is an unconscious bias. I'm going to talk about a few other definitions that I have been asked about. We talked about bias. Bias is a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, a person, or a group compared with another, usually in a way that's unfair or unflattering. Biases can be against an individual, a group, or an institution, and can have negative or positive consequences. And as mentioned, they can be conscious bias or unconscious bias, where we're not aware that we're having a bias. Prejudice is an opinion against a group or an individual, often based on insufficient facts and usually unfavorable, or it is an intolerant against other people. Stereotype. A stereotype is a belief that characterizes people based merely on their group affiliation, their group membership. And discrimination. Discrimination is a behavior that advantages or disadvantages people merely based on their group affiliation or their group membership. So remember, bias is a prejudice is an opinion, stereotype is a belief, and discrimination is the behavior. So if we all have unconscious bias, how do we decrease unconscious bias? Well, I'm going to provide you with 4 tips. The first one is, let's try and focus within. Tune into your emotions. Try to understand, are they irrational fears? And recognize also how your experiences has shaped your perspective. We all have been shaped by our experiences, our lived experiences, our family, our customs, our traditions, our family beliefs. So we have to recognize that we have lived experiences that shape how we view and see the world. When you're faced with a situation, don't make assumptions and try to stick to the facts if you can see them clearly. And if you can't, just take a step back, practice some of those tips that we talked about take a step back, breathe, take some time to think. And most importantly, when you focus within, try to turn your frustration into curiosity. And that is the curiosity to maybe want to learn about others. When we're trying to learn about others, I think that it's important to recognize also how their lived experiences have shaped their perspective. Also, how their culture, their family, their beliefs, their customs, their traditions have shaped their perspective, just like yours have shaped your perspective. Think also about how your actions may have impact someone else. Maybe not intentionally, but did it offend them? Did they react in a way that you did not expect? Was it something that perhaps they found offensive? Just think about how what you did might be perceived by that other person and how it impacted them. Did it make them sad? Did it make them hurt? So just think about that. One of the best things that we can do to learn about others is to engage in a dialogue. And when we do that, engage in a curiosity and open, authentic, and genuine way. So ask open-ended questions. Listen to understand, not to debate. You're trying to learn from people. One of the things that I do is before I frame a question, I'll preface it by saying, help me to understand, or I'm trying to understand, do I have it right? And that creates a safe and open space for a dialogue. Offer your views without defensiveness or combativeness. You're trying to have a conversation. This is not where you're trying to prove your point. Disentangled impact from intent. I know that sometimes we don't intend to hurt. Sometimes we just don't realize it. But if we do, try to understand the impact that it has on the other person. And most importantly, avoid blame. We're trying to have a dialogue and engage and get to know people. So think about how you can contribute as an active participant to engaging in a dialogue. And expand your options. Brainstorm possible solutions. And brainstorming can have two phases. You can brainstorm by yourself initially. Spend some quiet time, think about it. And once you have done that, include others and broaden your circle of brainstorming individuals that can have a dialogue and think of ideas. Be flexible about different ways to approach a common goal. There may be one goal or a few goals, but we know that there are different ways that can help us and different approaches that can help us to get to the same goal and meet our objectives. Experiment and evaluate. Be open to evaluation. Take your time to evaluate something, a product, a program, instead of rushing through it. Always step back and say, we piloted something. Let's evaluate it. How do we feel about it? And of course, seek out diverse perspectives. Studies have shown that diverse teams are more creative and we can get more out of a situation when we include diverse individuals. So I hope that now you are resilient and ready to go out again as we start opening up after the COVID crisis. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you again.